Italy arrests 6 fishermen for people smuggling, but were the men trying to rescue refugees at sea? We spoke to one of the fishermen before his arrest and asked, is he a hero or a criminal? I'm Imran Garta, and today's newsmaker is Shamsuddin Bourassin. Shamsuddin Bourassin is a local legend in the Tunisian town of Zarzis. He has a reported track record of rescuing migrants from almost certain death. So it's why Bourassin's supporters rallied outside the Italian embassy in Tunis after he and his fellow fishermen were accused of people smuggling. It centers around an incident 2 weeks ago when they came across a group of migrants on board a boat with a failing engine. They say the migrants refused to go back to Tunisia and pleaded to be taken to Italy. But the Italian Coast Guard is crying foul, saying there's no report of an SOS call by either the fishermen or the migrants. So, could Bourassin and his friends be convicted of aiding illegal migrants and spend the next 15 years in jail? That debate in a moment. But first, TRT World's documentary series Off the Grid spoke to Bourassin before his detainment. Let's take a look.
خرجنا من أول 11’s مرنا واضحة قريب نوصلوا غادي البلدوزة طاح بينا المحرك المطاع ما عرفناش نعمل، قعدنا مروحين ثم مدة من زمان لين نشرف المركب هذا سينيال لنا شفنا مركب بوراسين، احنا عيطنا عليه سينيالونا ونادوا عليهم، جانا بارك الله فيه.
Stranded at sea, 14 Tunisian migrants seek help from nearby fishermen.
نبلغ عليكم السلطات التونسية، احنا ما بقيناش درية فيهم نحن روحي كانت تتكلم السلطات التونسية. كانت قالت نجم تعاوننا بحاجة عاوننا هني باش ترجعني لتونس مستحيل.
Faced with a bleak choice, 6 Tunisian fishermen towed the broken boat towards Italy. They were picked up by Italian authorities. Some migrants were sent back. Others were taken to a refugee center. The fishermen were detained. Their families and the Tunisian authorities are asking for their release. They're accused of aiding and abetting illegal immigration, and if convicted, face up to 15 years in jail. Shamsuddin Bourassin is one of the men behind bars. He's the head of Zarzis Fishermen Association and a legend in this Tunisian coastal city near the Libyan border. TRT World met him just a few weeks ago to talk about rescuing migrants.
كل المراكب اللي تزاول النشاط نتاعها في الأعماق وفي الحدود مع ليبيا هي مجهزة برادو سوفتاج، مجهزة ببوات فارماسي، مجهزة بجليد سوفتاج، معناها يفي بالحاجة عند الاعتراض مراكب الهجرة اللي عندهم مشاكل. كل المراكب تعدت بتكوين، وكل المراكب خاصة في الوضعية ماش سليمة ياسر، وضعية نعرفوا الفيروس اللي موجود في افريقيا لازم ينتقل العدوى متاعها من المهاجرين إلى معناها بعض الصيادين. وضعية البركاجات، وضعية المهاجرين يخرجوا من ليبيا مسلحين، يعني الوضع خطير جدا، ولكن تحملنا مسؤولياتنا احنا.
Almost everyone here has saved migrants whose journeys went wrong.
وصلنا من 900 يعني منقذ، 900 واحد انقذناه في يوم.
These fishermen are on the same route as the boats trying to reach the Italian island of Lampedusa. They often encounter boats in distress. But for Bourassin, rescuing them is a moral duty.
المساعدة متاعنا تقتصر على انقاذهم مش على تشجيعهم على الهجرة، لكن اليوم دمجونا احنا بيباننا مفتوحة اليوم وغدوة والى ان يرث الله الارض ومن عليها. احنا هني باش نقولوا للعالم وباش نقولوا للناس اللي تحب تقتل المهاجرين، احنا هني بيباننا مفتوحة، وقطاع الصيد البحري بيخدم وخدم وقت اللي ما عليهش املاءات، وبيخدم ولا املاءات عليه، وباش ننقذوا الناس، وبحارتنا كل مجندة من اجل انقاذ الناس. وعرفتونا على طبيعتنا في 2000 و2002 و2005 و2010 وقت اللي كان القمع في ليبيا في تونس، فاحنا اليوم امكانياتنا زادت كبرت وتكويننا زاد كبر، وباش ننقذوا الناس كما قلت لك اليوم وغدوه الى ان يرث الله الارض ومن عليه.
A moral duty that could come at a very high price. now that the Italian authorities accuse them of smuggling people instead of rescuing them.
Well, that was Sandra Gatman with footage from the TRT World documentary Off the Grid, The Sacrifice of Migrants. Well, joining me now from Geneva is Leonard Doyle. He is the spokesman for the Director General of the International Organization of Migration. Leonard, thanks so much for joining us. This curious case of Shamsuddin Bourassin, very divisive issue. Does the IOM have a position on this?
Our position is that if migrant lives are at risk, these lives need to be saved, and that has to be the priority, and that is what we stand behind. The issue of the Mediterranean is such a tragedy for so many people trying to get to a better life, whether they're being smuggled or trafficked or whatever the reason is that's bringing them there. What concerns us is that when their lives are at risk, that's the time to save them.
And so were they acting correctly by trying to save the boat and towing the trawler?
Well, if anybody's life was at risk, I think you and I would agree that these people's lives have to be saved. I don't think anybody is going to allow somebody to drown in front of their eyes if they are at risk. Now, there may be more finer points here that need to be explained by those who are on the scene or by the Italian judiciary, whatever. But from the perspective of lives being at risk and lives being in danger, they need saving.
As the IOM, you encourage legal migration. From many others within Italy, especially in the current Italian government, they say any illegal migration, none of our business. We have our borders, no more Mare Nostrum, no more going out of our way to save anybody. We look after our own. We're not doing anything illegal. Your response to that is what?
Well, we, first of all, you will not find us using the term illegal migration, because these are convicted of no crime except trying to improve quite often desperate lives. And remember, for all those who maybe, queue jumpers, if you want to use that kind of language, there are many who are inadvertently there. What about the unborn child of a pregnant woman? What about the unaccompanied minor? What about the trafficked person who thought they were legally getting a job? These people are not knowingly committing any crime, so they obviously need protection and are very vulnerable at that point. So from the perspective of the humanitarian perspective, to say the least, there has to be a priority on saving lives. And this is precisely why IOM, along with UNHCR, have been discussing the notion of disembarkation points where there can be safe, orderly disembarkation of people, and their cases can be assessed in an appropriate way.
We got confirmation from MSF on Monday that earlier in the month, more than 100 migrants died when their crowded rubber boats were wrecked off the coast of Libya. More than 100 people. That number is, more than 1,000 this year, as far as I understand from your figures and, general UN figures. Why are we still seeing this happen? And if there's one actor, one protagonist to blame, who would that be?
Well, life is more complex than one protagonist, and I think we know that. But the fact of the matter is that many people still believe that by leaving desperately poor lives in West Africa, or fleeing for their lives, or for that matter being tricked into going north, that they can get to a better life. Whereas in fact, it's getting far more difficult. They have to go through a gulag effectively in Libya. They are then being preyed upon by traffickers and by smugglers. So there are many people who have guilty hands in this equation. And I think it would be just a little bit naive to try and identify one. But what clearly has to happen is that these people deserve a better future than to die on the high seas. And that future is surely at home in a developed economy. And I think that's where a lot of the attention is going now, is how can these economies, which are not doing terribly well, be improved? And how can the growing population of Africa be accommodated in a healthier way than having people migrate in an irregular fashion?
Leonard Doyle, good to get the IOM's perspective. Thank you very much for joining us. Let's open up the discussion to our panel. In Rome is Guglielmo Picchi. He's the Italian Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs. We also have Valerio Bordonaro, a former member of the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs under a previous government. And finally, Valentina Zagaria, a researcher at the London School of Economics. I thank you all for joining us on The Newsmakers. Valentina, let me begin with you. Shamsuddin Bourassin, smuggler or rescuer?
So I lived in Zarzis for over 2 years to carry out fieldwork for my PhD, and I know Shamsuddin Bourassin and the fishermen of Zarzis very well, and they've been involved for over 15 years in rescue at sea in the Mediterranean. And I believe, although we're only in the preliminary investigation phase at the moment, and no official data has been released yet by the judiciary in Italy about this case, I believe that Shamsuddin and his crew members were rescuing 14 people at sea who were in distress, whose engine had broken, and who needed help, who needed anyone's help, and they were there to rescue them.
Okay, so Guglielmo, these people are rescuing people from certain death because their boats are in distress, and you want to throw them in jail for 15 years. What's going on?
As you know, the judiciary is an independent power in Italy, so all I can say is that there is an investigation going on. The people are currently under custody in Italy, so there is all the investigation taking place. I am sure that the magistrates will do all their best to assess what indeed happened in this specific case. What is sure that Italy has to be within the democratic framework of the judiciary. It has no mercy towards the people who are smugglers or human traffickers of human beings. That is simply unacceptable. So I hope that the magistrates could, be as quick as possible to ascertain whether these people were smugglers or simply rescuing people. Is not business of the government to interfere on the course of the judiciary.
But I think the important point is that this government doesn't like the fact that you have to go out anyway to rescue people who are trying to make it to the mainland. Your government rejected the Aquarius. We can see the pattern. You're not a fan of immigration. Is that fair?
I mean, we, as almost every other European country, we are against illegal immigration. We are hard in fighting the smugglers and human traffickers at large. What we should do is not to prevent people being rescued in the Mediterranean and simply have not them risking their life and enter this kind of journeys. This means that our government has to put in place, and the whole of Europe has to put in place policies to prevent the people arriving on the shores or either, in this case specifically, Libya, and the causes, the root causes are dealt with at the origin states.
In the meantime, while those policies are not in place, and as we just heard from the IOM, people are going into gulags, their words, not mine, Leonard Doyle's words, they're being preyed upon. In the interim, while we don't have those policies and we haven't addressed the root causes, people are taking to the seas. They are drowning in huge numbers. 1,000 people have died this year. While that is the reality, is it not incumbent upon your government to rescue people at need?
I mean, we rescued whoever was in need. Wherever they were, we always rescued them. And we brought to our ports so far. Now we're saying that this rescue, of course, could take place, is legally, binding, and we object nothing at all, and we are doing our part. This has to be done also from all the other Mediterranean states, Spain, France, Malta, Greece, and all the others. We don't see any rescue from neighboring country. I've not seen any Tunisian rescue at any sort. So why has all the burden and all the negativity on Italy?
Okay.
I mean, we have been rescued, everyone.
Okay.
And
so let's
if someone is in trouble within the territorial Libyan coast.
Right. Okay. So Valerio, it's Libya's problem. It's Tunisia's problem. If somebody is just off their coast, Italy has already carried a heavy burden over the years, and it's still acting within the law. It's playing by the rules according to Italian law and international law. Do you accept that, Valerio?
Well, it's everybody's problem. There's a boat in danger in the Mediterranean, and it's not an Italian law or a Tunisian or Libyan law. We have international sea law, and if someone's in danger, it's mandatory to save them. By the way, I totally agree this time with Guglielmo Picchi when he says about the fishermen cases. We have judiciary independent, and so was rescuing people or he was a smuggler. The point is that we are talking about a particular case and we are forgetting or we are hiding, I don't know, that the government is not acting to solve a bigger issue. It's migrations in general, not this particular case that is important.
Okay, Valentina, is the government hiding the bigger issue? And would you accept that if the judiciary finds that Shamsuddin Bourassin and his colleagues were indeed smugglers, if they find ample evidence, then okay, they're smugglers and they need to face justice?
I think that the Italian government, by arresting Shamsuddin Bourassin and his 5 crew members, is taking yet another step in the direction of criminalizing and blaming the rescuers at sea, as opposed to supporting their work and as opposed to doing their duty in rescue at sea. And I would just like to remind everyone that the Italian government is a signatory to the 1951 Geneva Convention for Refugees, as well as all international maritime law conventions that state that when a boat in distress at sea sends an SOS and is in need, it must be rescued and brought to the first port of safety. I've heard Libya mentioned, and Libya, according to everyone, including members of the Italian judiciary, as well as UNHCR, IOM, and all sorts of international bodies, is not a safe port of return.
Right.
Therefore, Shamsuddin and his colleagues were taking the 14 people in distress at sea.
Okay. But
port of return,
right,
which was Lampedusa, and they have claimed that they have called the Italian Coast Guards to tell them that this was the case.
That's the disagreement, right? And I don't want to get bogged down in the details, but I think this is an important one, Valentina. So we have the Coast Guard and the prosecutors saying, even though Shamsuddin and the others said that they sent the SOS, they have no evidence of the SOS. So if there was no evidence of an SOS, would you accept that there might have been a mistake then from Shamsuddin and the others for not sending it? Or maybe they, I don't know, maybe it was broken. I have no idea. Maybe their radio was broken. But might that be a technical problem which led to a bigger political and legal issue?
I am of the opinion that this arrest comes after a chain of events and a whole summer of Italian Interior Minister Salvini saying that Italian ports are closed, criminalizing NGO boats, preventing them from working, even preventing its own Coast Guard from working. Only a week ago, the Diciotti incident took place, whereby an Italian Coast Guard vessel with 177 Eritreans and Somali on board wasn't allowed to disembark the passengers for 10 days. And an Italian Interior Minister is now being accused of kidnapping and of abuse of power. So I don't think this incident stands alone at all. And I don't think we can look at it as just a sort of mistake on the part of Shamsuddin Bourassin for not calling the Italian Coast Guards. Shamsuddin Bourassin and his fishermen were there when they needed to be, and they did what they needed to do according to international norms.
So, Guglielmo, this is your government, this is your party, and your Interior Minister, Matteo Salvini, has been mentioned. We're hearing from Valentina that this is part of a chain of events. She's going back earlier in the summer and she's saying there's a track record. She's listing the timeline here to show that your government doesn't like migrants, and therefore it's quite convenient then for you to take a particular stance on Shamsuddin and decide to prosecute them. Is that fair?
I mean, to be very clear, I mean, our government is in office since 100 days, 102 days. Fortunately, I mean, what we said in our electoral campaign, that was to stop the flow of migrants crossing the Mediterranean, not to have any more death at sea, I mean, is coming slowly to reality. So it's not a problem of liking or disliking migrants. The problem is if we should have illegal immigration, yes or no. The answer, according to the UN, the European Union, any other multilateral organization, is that economic migration there's no such thing as economic migration. Accordingly, economic migrants should stay in their country of origins. On the other side, all the people that, I mean, are falling under the requisite on the characteristic of what is prescribed for receiving international protection or asylum, we are fully ready to take them and to do our best to give them a safe trip to Italy.
Guglielmo,
so we want to stop illegal migration.
Can I jump in here?
And yes, we are actually doing that.
Okay, you mentioned the UN and you mentioned these, the multilateral institutions, right? We have the UN also saying, from the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, who's sending a team to Italy, that she's going to look into the protection of migrants. And I see you smirk there, because this is interesting, right? We're talking about a track record, and we're talking about a context within which the Italian government is operating and behaving. She's sending a team to look into the protection of migrants after what she called an alarming escalation of attacks. You say we're not against migrants per se, but I'm going to add that to it, and here's your chance to respond. Again, is Italy creating, this government, creating a context within which migrants are rejected, not only rejected, but also attacked?
I mean, we are not creating anything against the migrants. We are not attacking migrants. We are not doing anything against migrants. I mean, they are people, and we do respect the human being as such, wherever they come from. Other thing is illegal migration, and we are pretty tough in fighting it, as is any other European country. I mean, this is nothing different from what is doing France on its border with Italy in Bardonecchia and in Ventimiglia. They are closing their borders. There is no Schengen agreement working now with France. It's the same as doing Spain, rejecting migrants in Ceuta and Melilla. So Italy is not doing anything else.
Although the Spanish took the Aquarius and you did not.
It's maybe time. Yeah, for 45 days, we should be very clear. Spain was ready to take the Aquarius for 45 days.
Right.
5. This is what, and then they were sending the people back. So we have to be clear on this.
Okay.
As for Madame Bachelet, I mean, I'm sure that there are human rights violations in so many countries under her authority that instead of investing money assessing the quality of how we have migrants, how we treat migrants in Italy, it's maybe better if she directs herself in another country where there is no parity.
How about she does that and Italy?
Men and women and,
fair enough.
and
Guglielmo,
so on and so forth.
I want to give Valerio a chance here, but I mean, I guess I'd say, and the UN looks at the whole world, how about she looks at other human rights violations and possibly in Italy? Valerio, very finally, final word to you.
Well, you see, this government is hammering 70 years of multilateralism. And it's crazy how Italy now it can be alone with no allies anymore. And I would like to remember what happened in 1937 when Italy left the League of Nations. We're doing exactly the same. Salvini said we will reconsider our funding to the UN. It's crazy. It's something completely crazy. And it's UN's right to say that something is going wrong. You know, when violence causes silence, it means that we are mistaken. And I don't want to be mistaken. I want the UN to speak loud, to look for evidences, and I will be super happy if this evidence will not be found.
Okay, Valerio Bordonaro, Guglielmo Picchi, and Valentina Zagaria, I thank you all for joining us here on the Newsmakers. And before we go, just a reminder that you can watch the entire TRT World documentary, Off the Grid, The Sacrifice of Migrants, on trtworld.com. Coming up on the program, hardliners in Pakistan struggle to win seats in recent elections. But do they still hold sway over the government? And we discuss why the death toll from the 9/11 attacks continues to rise 17 years on. Hardline groups in Pakistan ran 1,500 candidates in recent elections. And while they didn't win much, they did earn millions of votes. That makes the far-right Islamic parties a voice to be heard. And some fear that Prime Minister Imran Khan is listening. Among the groups is one that calls itself Ahl Sunnah wal Jamaat, which in a former incarnation was responsible for the beheading of the American journalist Daniel Pearl. So, what kind of effect are these militants turned politicians having on the ruling party? Shoaib Hassan went to Pakistan's central Punjab province to find out.
They're seen as an existential threat by some Pakistanis and by others as the guardians of the country's Islamic identity. But all that may be changing after the latest elections sent men like Muawiyah Azam into Punjab's provincial parliament. Their election is part of an effort by the powerful security establishment to persuade extremist and militant groups to give up violence. Azam is the deputy leader of the 11’s wal Jamaat, or Party for Sunnis. We met him while he was campaigning.
We believe we can achieve our legitimate goal in Parliament because it's a sovereign institution in a democratic country like Pakistan. Taking an AK-47, firing bullets, or indulging in violence are illegal means, which we never liked or adopted.
11’s wal Jamaat is the latest name for the Sipai Sahaba Pakistan organization. It was founded in 1985. It began as a front to turn Pakistan into a Sunni theological state as a reaction to the rise of Shia political activism following the Iranian Revolution in 1979. It initially was an extremist political group, but its members took up arms after Shia militants assassinated its founder Haq Nawaz Jhangvi in 1990. The militants eventually morphed into the Lashkar-e-Jhangvi or LEJ, security officials regarded as the deadliest militant group in Pakistan and Afghanistan, the main proxy for Al-Qaeda and now Daesh in the region. It's been manned by Pakistan since 1996 and declared a global terrorist organization by the US and many other Western countries in 2003. It's killed thousands of people in attacks, including security personnel, political leaders, diplomats and Westerners. The 11’s wal Jamaat denies any links to the LEJ, but security officials insist the group provides political and legal support to the militants. Experts say that's why, despite the effort to mainstream such groups, attacks have gone on.
Last year, this group has managed six attacks in the country, but these 6 attacks were big, high-profile attacks. And comparing with the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Taliban, which had managed the 70 attacks in the same period, has killed around 180, and in 6 attacks, this group had claimed around 150 casualties. So scale of their attacks always seems very high.
All that seems to matter little here in the Jhang district, the birthplace of religious militancy in Pakistan. The 11’s wal Jamaat enjoys popular support here, as in other parts of the country, and many locals see the party as a champion of the poor and others neglected by the government. It's not the only extremist or former militant group to have contested July's elections. Allahu Akbar Tehreek managed a rousing campaign. It's a political incarnation of the Jamaat ad-Dawa, led by the alleged mastermind of the Mumbai attacks, Hafiz Saeed. Although it didn't win any seats in parliament, it still managed to win thousands of votes. The most prominent group is Tehreek-e-Labbaik Pakistan of firebrand cleric Khadim Rizvi. He's led a campaign to protect Pakistan's blasphemy laws. Despite winning just 2 seats in the Sindh provincial parliament, the party's political clout removed an expert from the government's top economic advisory body. That's because the man belongs to the Ahmadi community, whose beliefs are considered blasphemous by the extremists. Pakistani governments have been hesitant to change the blasphemy law after the killing of Salman Taseer, governor of Punjab and an anti-blasphemy law campaigner. He was shot dead by his bodyguard, Mumtaz Qadri.
Mumtaz Qadri was one man. Now we have millions of Mumtaz Qadris ready. All praise to God. The day is not far away when Sharia law will be implemented in Pakistan, and God willing, we will take traitors like former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif to the gallows.
The religious militant brigade has long been a double-edged sword for Pakistan. It was once seen as a highly effective proxy paramilitary, used especially to push back much larger regional rival India in Kashmir and Afghanistan. But all that changed after 9/11, which brought a crackdown on the militants. Hundreds of activists were detained without charge and many died in extrajudicial killings. The militants retaliated, and thousands of people have died in bombings and other attacks. But Azam says the militant attacks are by rogue members, and his party has always upheld the law.
We have continued our struggle for the last 30 years through legal and constitutional means. We have continued this struggle while carrying the coffins of our loved ones and facing false cases against us. Despite the killings of 4 of my family members at the hands of terrorists, I continued my struggle.
But not everybody agrees with Azam's interpretation of events. Security experts say militants revert to violence if their parties fail in elections. They also give examples of what happens when the government remains silent about vigilantism. In 2007, students at Islamabad's Red Mosque launched a campaign to stop illegally constructed mosques from being demolished. They also formed vigilante squads and attacked and kidnapped residents they viewed as immoral. The government stood silently by. The crisis eventually ended when commandos stormed the mosque. More than 100 people were killed, and enraged militant groups launched retaliatory attacks over the next 2 years that left thousands more dead. The Red Mosque in Islamabad remains a symbol of what could happen if only forces used to crush Pakistan's militants and extremists. But it also remains an example of what's likely to happen if they take control. So, will extremist groups taking part in July's elections help end religious violence in Pakistan? Or will this be another failed effort to rehabilitate the militants? Shoaib Hassan, The Newsmakers in Punjab province.
Well, joining me now to discuss this from Islamabad is Arshi Hashmi. She's an associate professor at the Department of Peace and Conflict Studies at Pakistan's National Defense University. And at a train station in Amsterdam, we have South Asian politics and military affairs expert Aisha Siddiqa. I thank you both for joining us. Aisha, let me begin with you. After this latest election, and especially with regards who ran in that election, is Pakistan mainstreaming extremism?
Extremism was getting mainstream for a long time. It's nothing new. What we see really are the fruits of, this whole policy of extremism, of mainstreaming. Instead of, really working on their policy and working on their ideology and working on their agenda, what the state has done is kind of brought them into politics, allowed them to control, allowed them to have better communication with the society, and thus mainstream their own ideology. But if, reference to some of the recent events, especially firing of the top economist, I think that was something slightly different. And, we can talk about it later.
Okay, so we'll bring it up. I'll get to that, and I'm going to pivot to it in a few minutes' time. But let me ask Arshi the same question. Is Pakistan mainstreaming extremism when we look at groups such as the one that calls itself Ahl Sunnat wal Jamaat, which found its roots in what is clearly an extremist organization that killed people, based on religious ideology? Can we say that things are going in a radical direction?
No, I don't think so. There is certainly a problem of extremist groups in Pakistan, and it's not just a new phenomena. Of course, we have seen many other groups who have been, trying to assert their position in Pakistan. See, the problem is not just the issue of, getting into the politics and getting into, placing their candidates in the elections and all that. It's more of the nature of the society. The way religiosity is taken in Pakistan and the kind of political, I would say, if not political, but certainly social space that certain groups have acquired, that is something to be worried about. But if we give this statement that Pakistan as a state is mainstreaming extremism, I think it's a bit of an exaggeration.
Okay.
Because
So let me then ask Aisha, right? So, okay, I'm going to ask this a bit differently then. Whether it's coming from the top or whether it's coming from the bottom. In a democracy, sometimes, if enough people believe a certain thing, for example, death for blasphemers or something like that, Aisha Siddiqa, are we seeing a situation where enough people believe certain things that could be intolerant of religious minorities and so forth, which drags the political mainstream and the state in that direction? Is that happening right now, Aisha Siddiqa?
See, ideology doesn't grow on trees. It's not that people one day got up and said, oh, we are going to be extremists, or we are going to have an extremist ideology. I mean, I've probably lived a bit longer than Arshi, and I can say that there were times when the Shia and Sunni were kind of much more joined. They lived together. There wasn't that apprehension of, from one sect to the other. There was no fear. Now, what has happened is, especially since the mid-1970s and later the 1980s, the way the state, and when by the state, I mean the deep state, played a role in basically to fight, in order to fight the American war in Afghanistan.
Right.
What was done was kind of turn the society around, make it more extremist, and that process has never stopped. And what people are saying today, and if people are saying hang the Ahmadis, or people are saying killing people, or people killing people for blasphemy, that is not something which has happened in a day. That's happened in decades.
Right. And some people have
there's a
certainly. Some people have blamed Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. Some people have blamed Zia-ul-Haq and so forth. That's more of a historical discussion as to the roots of it, the war in Afghanistan and so forth. On the ground today, Arshi, let me give you one example, right? So where Aisha is right now, Amsterdam, the Netherlands, we see Pakistan not very happy with the Netherlands. Now, a lot of these groups don't necessarily have to be in the National Assembly. Many of them didn't get any seats in the National Assembly, but they made enough noise and promised to shut down cities such as Lahore. We saw Tehreek-e-Labbaik shut down Islamabad last year. Enough so that the National Assembly decided to vote on the Dutch caricatures. Now, Geert Wilders might be an unpalatable character, but he's not the leader of the Netherlands. This became an issue between Pakistan and the Netherlands, and Pakistan took this very strong stance against the Netherlands and promised to bring it up at the UN and so forth. Is that enough to tell us, Arshi, that they don't need to be in government in order to shift the narrative? If they make enough noise, the politicians will be offended on their behalf and follow suit with them. Is that fair?
Well, I think to an extent we can say that, this is certainly a problem where even those who are not really, those parties which are, and you know that in the elections, how our electoral system works. So most of the people who, manage to get into the National Assembly, they don't really belong to these religious groups. But certainly this is a problem that even these groups who are not in the assembly, they manage to sort of exert some pressure. And this is where I bring the issue of the society, where even if the government and the constitution and the state is saying that we have certain rules and certain framework where people have equal rights and everything, but then what is happening within the society that these groups have managed to get enough space where they can influence other people. There is also the role of media as well.
Certainly. Arshi, let me come in for a second.
They get access.
Can I come in for a second? Society didn't retract the job offer to Atif Mian, the economic advisor, right? Society didn't do that. That came from the Federal Minister of Religious Affairs, and government retracted that. So you have Imran Khan's new government say, here's an economic advisor. The guy is good at his job and he's going to be good for the economy. He happens to be an Ahmadi. The religious affairs guy says, I'm sorry, I don't like his approach to religion. They withdraw the job offer. That didn't come from society, it came from government. So would you concede to Aisha that this is government playing religious sectarianism in politics?
Again, I would say the government would never say, and no government has ever said that they are actually doing that. But certain actions and policies or decisions that certainly provide the opportunity to such groups, and that is our main problem, where they have to manage. So if the PTI would, if you talk to their people, they would definitely say that they don't really subscribe to the ideas of those extremist organizations. But this decision, and let me tell you this, it's not just that these groups, they manage that, but there are other people also. There is a other side of the story also, and there, if you look at our social media and if you look at the media, mainstream media, there are voices where people are coming up with with their sort of they don't really agree with what the government did. So it's like right now in Pakistan there is this kind of a discourse which is gradually developing, and I'm sure that, and I have actually read that, and you must have seen that even the PTI voters, they have been saying this thing that though they do support PTI government and they do believe that there is this government who would who has this sort of many promises for Pakistan, but then this particular action is not taken in a very good taste. Right. So I agree to an extent that there are certain decisions which could have been handled more wisely than the way they've been. And this is the real test for the government also.
Right.
Yeah.
Aisha Siddiqa, what does that tell us? Offering a guy a job and then having the religious affairs federal minister deciding this doesn't quite cut it, and the PTI and the government withdrawing the job offer. What does that tell us about the PTI, the current government, and Prime Minister Imran Khan moving forward?
Well, you see, firstly, the PTI, when you say PTI supporters, one segment of the PTI is also religious right. So what they're saying is that they don't agree with the government, is what they're saying is that ideologically they don't agree with it. And it's interesting that the PTI government backed off on social media, and they backed off. So what it tells about the PTI government is that in future it's not going to stand up to any pressure from the religious right. But then let me draw your attention towards another thing, which is that was this really a genuine protest? Because what we've seen is TLP, the Tehreek-e-Labbaik Ya Rasulullah, and Tehreek-e-Labbaik Pakistan. This is a party which surfaced in these recent 2018 elections, and they're brought up and they're made to protest every time there is a political contest and there's a political pressure in which or a political issue in which the military also doesn't agree. Now, is it really that firing Atif Mia was really about the right wing having problem with his faith, or was it some other actors who didn't like the fact that he questioned the China-Pakistan economic corridor, and therefore this was an excuse to kind of get him off the track and get him off the Economic Affairs Commission?
Okay, that's an interesting angle. For the moment, Aisha Siddiqa and Arshi Hashmi, I thank you both for joining us here on the Newsmakers. 17 years ago, passenger planes were turned into missiles that flew into New York's Twin Towers, hit the Pentagon, and crashed into a field in Pennsylvania. Almost 3,000 people were killed. But after the dust settled, the death toll continued to rise and is still rising today. Thousands of first responders have become sick with cancers and other ailments from toxins at Ground Zero. And soon, those who were killed by disease will outnumber those who lost their lives in the actual attacks. Well, to find out more, I'm joined by John Feel. He's a former demolition supervisor who lost half a foot in an accident at Ground Zero, and is also the founder and president of the Feel Good Foundation, which advocates on behalf of emergency personnel. John, good to have you on the program. For many, 9/11 is more than just a memory. It left them sick, it left them hurt. First of all, tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience and the impact 9/11 has had on you.
Well, one, thank you for having me today. And my story, while gruesome and horrific, pales in comparison to the tens of thousands that are sick and dying or who have passed away from a 9/11 related illness. I was there for 5.5 days. Roughly 8,000 pounds of steel crushed my left foot. I spent 11 weeks in the hospital, and I wound up getting gangrene, and I had half of my foot amputated, and I've had about 30 surgeries since then. But I'm lucky, I'm blessed. I didn't have the Feel Good Foundation to advocate for me when I got hurt. I had to do it all on my own, and I had to learn the hard way so I can teach others and help others. you know, but since then, I've helped pass 9 pieces of legislation, donated over $5 million in a kidney. So at the time, it was the worst day of my life. Still not going to say it's the best day of my life, but it showed our country who I am and what I'm made out of. And you know, we talk about 9/11. You can't remember something that hasn't ended yet. This is a continuum. We're continuing 9/11. Sadly, those who lost their lives that day to senseless violence, but so many have died since. That day's not over. It's a day that keeps taking from us. It's that beautiful Tuesday morning that keeps taking 17 years later. And this is not a remembrance for us in the 9/11 community. It's a continuum.
Why do you think the Feel Good Foundation is necessary? Why aren't the existing authorities and structures enough for people who are victims of the attacks?
Well, listen, the Feel Good Foundation was just created as a reaction to the lack of action by our state, local, and federal governments. We exist now so we can work with them. We force them to do the right thing. We're making sure that they continue the right thing. And we continue to advocate so that as the 9/11 community evolves for the worse, that these programs that we helped create evolves with them. So, you know, I never wanted to do this. This wasn't my life goal. It happened. And, you know, after every disaster, there's usually some sort of advocacy and grassroots activism that takes place. And it just happened to be the Feel Good Foundation. You know, I'm never the smartest man in the room. And trust me, I'm not the smartest man on this interview right now. But I have the ability not to accept no when human life is at stake. I don't label anybody. I don't label religion. I don't label skin color. I don't label political affiliation. But if you're in the power to help, you have the position to help, and you have an elected role where you're supposed to help and you don't help, then I'm going to be your worst nightmare.
Yeah, well, you might be the smartest person in this interview. That's up for debate. Let's let the viewers decide. Now, looking back and looking at the timeline now, 17 years on, and all the people that have suffered, especially, you know, we look at cancer, we look at those who have suffered physical injuries. Did the first responders get it the worst?
Yeah, those who were on the pile, who were directly impacted. Listen, I was on the pile. I have breathing issues, scarring of the lungs, but I'm not sick like everybody else. I stay in shape, I exercise, I eat right, and a lot of these stuffs, some of them can be healed. But those who work directly on the pile are more at risk than those who were blocks away in the geographic map south of Houston Street. You know, the absorption through the nose, mouth, and skin made us sick. We ate there, we slept there, we worked there, we cried there, we went to the bathroom there. If you took every toxin and put them in a bottle, you'd have a skull with crossbones saying harmful if swallowed. Now you had thousands of toxins that no scientist or no doctor ever saw before. And we were working in an environment that just was basically a toxic soup, a stew of deadly toxins that invaded our bodies.
And within that 9/11 community that you talk of, people who have been affected and are still feeling those effects, what do they want from authorities? Do they want compensation? Do they want their medical bills paid? Do they merely want more recognition? In a nutshell, what do they want?
I think, depends who you ask, it would be all three. I just want to see justice. Nobody ever apologized for their lies and for causing this. For me, it's always been about the healthcare. Take 9/11 out of the equation, 90% of Americans go bankrupt because of healthcare. You can't spend money if you're not healthy and if you're dead, right? So I don't need the recognition. I know what I did there. But, you know, 17 years later, we got a bill passed in 2015, the James Sadroga Health and Compensation Act. We got 75 years of free healthcare. That means we're monitored, we're treated, our prescriptions and our surgeries are paid for. But the compensation part runs out in 2020, but they're going to run out of money before that. You know, Congress always puts these deadlines and dates on all of these pieces of legislation, but cancer doesn't have a deadline. And we still haven't even seen the asbestos cancers come out that have a 20-year manifest, 20 years to manifest. So I've always been about the healthcare. The compensation's great, but for me, again, as long as I have a roof over my head, I just need to be able to advocate and help people that are sick and dying because they were heroes 17 years ago.
And how important is it to you that there are some specific programs, such as the cancer-specific program at Mount Sinai Hospital right now, where they focus on those that have particularly suffered from 9/11. Is that, I guess, the fruits of all your advocacy over the years?
Yeah, sure. So I work closely with Mount Sinai, and Mount Sinai is the center of excellence, and it's the leading one because they were there from the beginning. But now there's centers of excellence all over the New York tri-state area. And now there's a national 9/11 program for the whole country. 433 out of 435 congressional districts were represented at Ground Zero during the 10-month cleanup. Somebody from every state went to New York. Many of them went home and got sick. Now they don't have to travel to New York like Mount Sinai or Stony Brook or Robert Wood Johnson in New Jersey. They can be treated in their home state and do a satellite hookup with Mount Sinai. So these are the things that we implemented when we got the bill passed the first time in 2010, then renewed in 2015 to ensure that these programs are now being streamlined so those who are waiting do not have to wait much longer than what they've already been waiting for.
Okay. John, good to talk to you on the Newsmakers. John Field, thank you very much for joining us. That's all for this edition of The Newsmakers with me, Imran Garda. You can check out more of our stories on YouTube, Facebook and Twitter. Remember to like, follow and subscribe. Next time, Venezuelans flee economic hardship. But can Colombia shoulder the burden? Until then, thank you for watching. Bye-bye.